say none of this is my original work. It's other contributors that have thought long and hard about this, and I'm just the messenger. In particular, Eugene, Sam, Vasily, Konstantin, Hasu, and others. Just a quick liquid staking 101, because I'm not sure how technical everyone is. There are two sides to a liquid staking protocol, right? The first is a productive, useful asset for users, and the second is a validator set, that's as good as possible for the underlying protocol. The actual token itself is just merely there to drive adoption and utility. And while most stakers don't care too much about the validator set size, it is necessary if you want to be a force for good in the ecosystem. Okay, so where does Lido fall short today? Many Ethereans are right to be skeptical of Lido in its current form. Lido has $15 billion in total value locked as of today, and the token valuation of LDO is only about $2 billion. The validator set is still too small, and governance is still too fragile. So it takes a lot of effort to get people to vote, and even then, the vote is usually decided by a few holders. But having said all that, it's easy to forget that Lido has only been around since December 2020, right? So it's a protocol that has grown tremendously fast. It's a rare example of a DAO that's created a product that users want. And contributors are incredibly introspective. I can say this after 6 months now contributing is, for me, I haven't come across a group of people that are this self-critical and introspective and constantly trying to push forward and make more resilient the protocol that they're trying to work on. In a way that's also rooted in pragmatic reality, right? So it's easy to be self-critical and too idealistic. It's difficult to do that in a way that's actually pragmatic. And yeah, committed to building the most resilient protocol possible. Not every DeFi project has received a compliment from this guy. So I think that's something to be proud of. Okay, so I'm going to just take a glass of water here, and then I'll go into dual governance. So, what is dual governance? It's all of these things, right? It's an important step towards mitigating protocol governance risk. It's a move away from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And it's a way for stakers to have a say in protocol changes. And it's the Lido DAO's current governance focus post-withdrawals. The main goal here is to actually prevent LDO holders from changing the social contract between the protocol and stakers without their consent. To understand why that's needed, you need to go into why Lido holders have the powers they have today, or actually more appropriately, what powers they have today. So right now, as you can see, LDO holders have quite a significant amount of power, right? They can upgrade the Ethereum liquid staking protocol code. They can manage the list of Oracle committee members. They can change how the stake is distributed between node operators in a harmful, unexpected way. They can change the governance structure. They can mint or burn LDO. They can change the fee percentage, right? They can hike the fee up to something ridiculous. And they can decide on how to spend the treasury. Of these decisions, arguably all of them affect stakers, apart from treasury spends. So the core idea behind dual governance is to give stakers the power to veto all decisions which concern them, which is effectively everything apart from treasury spends. The key constraints to keep in mind here are, we don't want to introduce new attack vectors. We want to allow Lido to recover from a captured state, and we don't want to overburden STETH holders with politics. Two key factors here are that STETH is highly liquid, so it's easy for an attacker to purchase a lot of STETH off the market quite quickly and attack the protocol. And 30% of STETH is locked in other protocols, so mainly Aave, Maker, Curve. These currently can't be used to vote in Lido governance, even if STETH vetoes were enabled. But these protocols can be compromised, some of them can be upgraded, and it's a sort of paranoid assumptions that we need to make is that this STETH can potentially be used to attack Lido. Okay, so I'm going to go through, rather than tell you where we are today, I'm going to go through how we got to where we are today, because I think it gives you a better understanding of why the current design is what it is today. So, okay, the pure sort of naive solution, right? If you're just sitting down and trying to sketch out a solution, the one you start with is, what if we just give STETH holders the power to vote on every decision that affects them, not just veto, to vote in favor or against, and just decide by a simple majority. So this doesn't work since, you don't become an STETH holder because you're interested in governance. You just want a staking product. I'm talking generally, right? That's sort of safe and easy to use that you can forget about. You don't want to get involved in politics. Okay, so that doesn't work. What if instead of requiring a simple majority vote, we allow STETH holders to just veto bad decisions, right? This is slightly better, right? Because you don't need to vote on everything. You just need to vote on things that you don't want to pass, but it doesn't get rid of the overhead that you need to check what's happening every vote. You need to be on top of it. And it doesn't get past the problem that 30% is locked in protocols that can't vote. If you go for local majority, this doesn't work because we expect few STETH holders to actually vote regularly. This is too easy for an attacker to game. Okay, so what if instead of requiring a majority, we empower a quorum of STETH holders, 15% say, of total STETH, to veto a bad decision? This is slightly better, but there is a downside, right? We want the happy path of governance to work reasonably quickly. STETH holders are difficult to rouse on short notice, even a small quorum of 15%. It can take several weeks to unwind from a DeFi position, so this would make Lido too slow to adapt to important changes. What if we allow for a smaller quorum of STETH holders this time to start vetoing, and then instead of that actually causing a veto, it just merely extends the time required for other veto holders to get involved. So you have this sort of this double two phases of quorum. The first phase requires just 5% or something like that to say, hang on, this is a bad decision. And this gives enough time for more STETH holders to get involved and become aware of that bad decision and unwind from their positions and vote to veto. So this is actually reasonably good, right? This fixes the happy path problem. Governance, most governance decisions can be still expected to happen quickly. However, you still have the problem that Lido can be brought to a halt completely. It goes back to the prior factors, right? STF is highly liquid. 30% are stuck in protocols that we need to make the paranoid assumption can be used against Lido. So this still has a problem that we need to fix. Okay. So, next iteration. Same as before, the first 2 points here are the same. You require a small quorum that can extend the vote for a larger quorum to get involved. But now you also allow STETH holders to vote against the veto. So rather than just requiring 15% and that's it, it's vetoed, as an STETH holder, you can say, hang on, I'm going to vote against that veto, right? So this gets around the problem of a large attacker coming in with 15% of STETH and freezing the protocol. Now you can have other people get involved and sort of counter this attacker's weight. So this is better. This is pretty good, though there is still a issue in terms of the criteria we're working towards. So one thing that Lido holders are still able to do under this dynamic is to overburden STETH holders, right? They can actually make proposal after proposal after proposal that essentially requires STETH holders to keep vetoing again and again and again. And one of our requirements is we don't want STETH holders to be burnt out by political action. So this doesn't work in the pessimistic case that Lido holders are trying to abuse their powers, which is the core design, the core reason why we're designing this. Okay, so this brings us to the current state of how we're thinking. So, same as everything we've said before. However, the difference this time here is if a veto passes on a specific decision or vote, then this essentially applies to all subsequent DAO proposals, right? So actually the DAO enters what's called a veto state, and every subsequent proposal is by default vetoed. So this gets around the problem of Lido holders exhausting STETH holders by continuing to make proposal after proposal after proposal. In veto state, the only thing is, STETH holders actually have to vote to anti-veto specific proposals. So the default is everything is vetoed, but if STETH holders really want to push something through, they can get together and say, actually, this specific proposal is okay, or this other, but they're not forced to do that. That's the key difference. And importantly, governance can only be brought back to normal state if both Lido governance and participating STETH holders agree to resolve the conflict. So I'm not going to go too deep into resolution, and there are some open questions here. But these are sort of the key properties we're trying to get to, which is anyone with STETH locked in the veto escrow can elect to withdraw their tokens if they're not happy with the negotiations. Both Lido governance and participating STETH holders, if they agree to resolve the conflict, then governance is transferred to a normal state, and the STETH locked in the veto escrow is released. If no resolution is possible, all STETH holders in favor of the veto should be able to decide what they want to do next, withdraw or remain staked. And no critical governance decision can be executed until all requested withdrawals have been completed. After withdrawals are completed, governance is transferred back to normal state. So that tells you the current, the current sort of state of the art of how we're thinking about this. However, we're not tied to this. It's possible that some people have a problem with coin holder voting, and it's possible that this doesn't make sense. This is something that I think needs to be questioned, and there are some open questions, as I said, that we need to figure out. Possible alternative paths here are, something like a veto council of reputable Ethereum community members. You could imagine, 3 or 4 members from the EF. You could imagine representatives from Aave, Maker, Curve, and client teams. Sort of similar approach to what Eigenlayer is taking, where you have a group of people that care deeply about the underlying protocol that can actually veto certain actions. This, however, has its downsides and also its open questions, right? How do you keep this council accountable? How do you choose it in a way that the biases of, you have some sort of cancellation of biases between the different members. They're not out there just to harm Lido. That the concentration of power doesn't, it doesn't form an attack vector from a concentration of power perspective over time. The other possible alternative is the two houses model, similar to optimism. However, there are also difficult open questions there, right? How do you decide who a citizen is? How do you, these are sort of very difficult fundamental questions. And having said all this, I think like the main, my perspective here is the main thing we want to do, right, is build the most resilient protocol possible. So we need to be able to learn and keep thinking from first principles and taking in the best ideas. So these are things we should be looking towards and thinking about, okay, whether they are applicable to Lido, and if not, why not? And this is just one piece of the puzzle. So we are working towards hard towards permissionless validation, right? That's unlocked by staking router, Lido v2. That's essential long-term to a more resilient protocol with the best validator set possible. Protocol ossification is also something that is a North Star for Lido. And moving beyond pure token holder governance, where ossification is not possible, is also something that we're working towards. Right now, there's way too much overhead in terms of root level governance, having to make way too many decisions on things that they shouldn't need to decide on. And so these things are all core to Lido becoming more resilient. In closing, I want to leave you all with Kelvin Fichter's words from Optimism Labs. A well-designed governance mechanism can quite possibly be more secure than Ethereum itself. This is the perspective that would make upgradable rollup bridges a viable scaling mechanism, and one that I hold very strongly. So this is something that I think, a lot of the skepticism towards Lido actually exists sort of further upstream at a sort of philosophical level, and it comes down to this skepticism of governance itself, right? And there is a sentiment underlying many in the Ethereum community that, if you have governance, then it will inevitably become captured. Like, my personal perspective here is soft governance will inevitably become captured because you have unaccountable power that over time, you cannot, people die, people have to inherit that power and so on, and with different influences. So we need to move past soft governance, and we need to embrace all sorts of experiments in governance and be more open to that. And this is something I firmly believe in, is we are very much in the early days, but it's not an excuse to say, just because our tools today aren't perfect, that we give up and actually the only thing that matters is soft governance. If you want to get involved, I encourage you to go on the research forum and have your voice heard. You'll see the discussions are, have been ongoing were quite active last year and have sort of tailored off since then, and that's because the team's been very busy with withdrawals and Lido v2, but now this is our area of focus, I would say, for the next 6 months. And so anything you have to add at this stage was incredibly valuable. All assumptions are open to being questioned. And yeah, so please get involved. Let us know what you think, and more than happy to collaborate and think through any idea you have. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, what option is preferable, and what is the option is preferable in terms of easy implementable? So what is like it's a lot of option how to build veto mechanism in a good way, but it introduces a lot of complexity. And can you see maybe some simple but not perfect things that already can, like something like that, you put 20% of your energy to solve 80% of a problem?
I mean, I think, so this would require you to look on the research forum, but I think Sam's approach with local settlement, what he calls local settlement, is pretty darn close to something I think would be a good first iteration. I think that I think it's important to be very careful about the details there, right? Like I think one of the, I think in scope of, to make this meaningful, I think you have to allow for a critical list of governance decisions that can be vetoed. And part of that list is the ability to modify that critical list, right? And I think that's something that I think you do need to kind of get the foundations right the first time. Otherwise, it can be very hard to fix the downstream consequences. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I think one of the core issues here is that there is little intersection between STETH holders and LDO holders. That's what's causing this problem. Do you think maybe we can address this issue by maybe encouraging STETH holders to get LDO or vice versa? Maybe that's like another way to address this problem.
It's a good point. I mean, I don't think it's sufficient, honestly, because I think that LDO is quite illiquid compared to STETH. I think, again, one of the constraints is you don't want STETH holders to feel like they have to get involved in politics regularly. So this would sort of burden them with that, right? So I don't think it quite works. Like, obviously, I think, you do want STETH holders to get, the ones that care about getting involved in politics, to get Lido and LDO and vote, but then you also need to cater for stakeholders that don't want to keep up with, what's happening, unless, there are other holders, right? That's the idea behind having 5% say that can sound the alarm, essentially. And then that alarm is loud enough that other people that don't necessarily care only have to get involved at that stage, right? And that should happen maybe maximum once or twice during their lifetimes. So I think this is like a way of getting that balance right. Now, you would hope that 5% that cares, right, they would also, get some LDO because they want to actually have more of a say in terms of what actually passes forward rather than just vetoing. But I don't think we should make that assumption that everyone, should do that.
Have you looked at how mechanically you're going to implement the veto? Is that already being enacted, or is that something you're researching now?
Yeah, I mean, Sam Kozin, who's arriving, I think maybe later today. His flight, I think he missed a connecting flight or something. He might be at the after party here, I'm not sure, but he's done the most amount of thinking around the precise mechanics. And so if you look at the research forum, he's done a pretty good job of sort of brain dump, but I think there's still more in his head that hasn't quite got there. So I would recommend talking to him. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you again. Sorry for cutting you before.